Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you here tonight on our November Sparks Transformative Language Arts call. And this is Kelly DuMar speaking to you on November 7th, 2017. I'm so delighted with our guests tonight who are going to be sharing with you an amazing talk about constellations of work, art, self-care, and life. We're going to be talking with Laura Packer and Caryn Mirriam-Goldberg. And they have put together this program tonight, which I have the good fortune to help them moderate. But I know that most everybody on the call probably knows a little bit about Caryn and Laura, but very short, I want to briefly introduce them to you. Caryn is the 2009 to 2013 Poet Laureate of Kansas. She's the author of more than 20 books of poetry, fiction, memoir, and anthologies. And I know she has a couple of upcoming books I hope she'll tell us about. She's the founder of Transformative Language Arts at Goddard College, where she teaches. And she's also certified in poetry therapy. Laura Packer, this is a pleasure for me because I've had both Laura and Caryn be features in the Sparks program prior to this. So welcome back, Laura. Laura Packer is an award-winning storyteller, and she works regularly as a storytelling coach and as a consultant with many nonprofit organizations and businesses. And just welcome you both back to the call. I know that what I know about both of you as teachers, as authors, as artists, as storytellers, is that Laura and Caryn, you've both found a way to have a livelihood based on doing the work that you love. Mm-hmm. That's really meaningful to you in your life. And I'm delighted on this program tonight that the two of you want to share with the group that's on the call how they could have that right livelihood and build that kind of life out for themselves as well. Mm-hmm. So welcome again. Caryn, perhaps you might say, I'd love to invite you both to say just a couple of things in terms of introduction of yourself personally that I didn't cover, because I know you do so much out there in the world. Is there one or two things you want to say, Caryn, about what you're doing that's not included? Because I know you have 2 books, I think, being released that are coming up. And then Laura, I'll ask the same from you.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I tell people I'm a little bit of a writing slut. I write in many genres. And I have this new book of poems, and a book of prose, kind of memoir, blog essays, called Everyday Magic, which is at the printer now. And I have a memoir about Miriam from the Bible, Reese, not anymore, because, it wasn't in the Bible, a novel about Miriam from the Bible wandering the U.S. political and spiritual landscape. And that's coming out in the spring. And I love writing, and I love working collaboratively with people and seeing what magic we can create in words and beyond words.
Wonderful. And Laura, anything you want to add to the very brief intro that I gave that might be of interest to the callers?
Well, I hope so. I am passionate about storytelling and about the power of shared story to transform individuals, to transform communities, transform the world. And so I've taken that passion and I apply it in a variety of ways. I help people think about how to share their story, what they might need to say. I help organizations learn how to be better listeners. So when those stories are told, they actually can be heard and can be acted upon. And I'm really fortunate, I'm blessed that I'm able to pursue this life path, that my life's journey has brought me to this place now where I'm able to make a living doing one of the things that I think is most vital to what it is to be human.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, we want to hear about all that. And while, just before we begin and I turn the discussion over to you two, I just want to tell everybody here who's here in the webinar that we're going to listen to Caryn and Laura for about a half an hour, 25 minutes. And then you will have a chance to ask them any questions or make any comments, be part of the discussion of the material they've presented to you. And after that, we're going to have our usual open mic that goes along with Sparks, where we each will share a very short poem, a song, or a story, and as we close down the evening before we head to bed, to have that beautiful sacred time to really hear each other's sharing. So that's how we'll wrap up the evening. Now, I sense that there's a new project afoot that is partly new in the school system. Please tell us what you two are doing with Right Livelihood. What is the program all about, and what is useful? Why are you doing it, and how can it help whoever is here listening?
Well, I guess I can dive in. And then Laura and I actually have questions to interview each other and see where we get there, because we're always learning new things about ourselves and each other through our discussion. When I first conceived of transformative language arts, I did so in concert with thinking about right livelihood. And in fact, the first thing I earned a college degree in was labor history, and I was very involved in the labor movement in the sense that what you do for a living influences your life. I believe that TLA is a way of creating all kinds of new avenues for income, for community building, for kind of finding your place and your people in your career and in all kinds of other ways. And so are we hearing the funny sound? It's just me?
No, I'm hearing it as well. Is everyone muted?
I'm going to go ahead and mute.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe, who knows what it is. So Laura and I have created the Right Livelihood Professional Training, which is a 4-month-long, somewhat intensive, but hopefully very delightful and rich and magical and alive training that's both in person and online and via video conferencing. And we'll tell you more and more about that as we kind of go through this. But the idea is that there's a lot of professional training tools and programs, workshops out there, but so often they're cookie cutter trainings. You know, do these 10 things, even though we have a top 10 list, ours is more open-ended. Do this and, you know, you will make millions or not be in poverty or whatever. And ours is very focused on working with both your callings, what work calls to you, what calls to you in your community, your health, your soul, and your community, and how can you interface all that and kind of divine through signs and wonders and hard work and networking and marketing and dealing with, you know, good financial management and ethics and everything else, how to move ahead and do meaningful work and or service and or art. So Laura, why don't I turn it over to you to take it from here?
So I'm really excited to be doing this training with you, Caryn, in part because, boy, I wish I'd had something like this 20 years ago. I think that many of us want to follow our calling, want to follow our passion, but it can feel quite isolating. So by developing this training, and then I hope for participants, there's an opportunity to have a sense of community and to really look into your own heart and see what is it that is driving you, and how can you do this so that you are serving yourself, your spirit, and the world. So I'm really excited about it. In part, as I said, in part because I get to work with you, which I'm excited about.
Thank you. I'm happy to work with you.
And also because this is part of my work, part of my approach to my work is that my work is service. I'm working out of service to the world, to my community, to the universe. And I think we live in a culture that promotes knowledge hoarding, that says if you figured out how to make it, you shouldn't share that with anybody else. I am a believer in sharing things and in helping others. I've received so many gifts of support that it seems like the right thing to do is to turn around and offer those gifts back.
Absolutely. And I believe so much in playing it forward. You know, I did my master's and PhD in a very traditional English department where it was rather cutthroat, and kind of the analogy for jobs and getting published and everything else was very much, there's only one pie, and if you're lucky, you'll get a thin slice. And I've always thought of TLA as a way to bake more pies.
Yes.
We have the tools and we can do that.
Yep.
And so that's very much about this. And so I wanted to start our questions with each other, Laura, by asking you to paraphrase Madeline Kahn in Young Frankenstein. What is it you do? Structure your time.
When I do that crazy thing that I do.
He questions Terry Garr what is it you do?
Mm-hmm.
And Terry Garr says she works in the laboratory with the doctor.
Yes, it's one of my favorite movies.
What is it you do, and how do you balance your time or structure your time with all of this?
So everything I do falls under the umbrella of storytelling. I perform. So I get up on stage, or I stand in the middle of the street, which has happened, or I stand in a classroom or in a library or wherever it may be, and I tell stories. I tell stories more for adults than for younger children, but I also do some work with families. So I perform. And my hope when I'm performing is that this magical moment of connection happens whenever there is a performance, when we all are aware that we're breathing in concert together and experiencing the elements of the story together. So there's performance. I coach. I help other people become better storytellers. And that ranges. Sometimes it's performing artists, sometimes it's writers, sometimes it's people who are seeking to understand part of their own personal story, but approaching it from the perspective of narrative. How does this fit into the rest of my life? The bulk of my income comes from consulting work, where I work with both for and nonprofits, helping them think about the stories they tell and how they can use them more effectively. So it may be an organization needs to think about their marketing efforts. So they need to think about the stories they're telling and who is their audience. It may be that they're experiencing a lot of attrition and they don't know why. So they need to think about what stories are being told internally, where are the communication gaps, all different kinds of things like that. I particularly like the consulting work because it gets to marry the artistic side of my brain and the logical side of my brain, the problem-solving side of my brain. So it's really fun putting those together. And I also coach. So I mentioned that already. I said coaching. So performing, coaching, consulting, and teaching. So I teach workshops, I lead retreats, I do facilitation, things like that. And I do a little bit of freelance writing, but I wouldn't say that that's enough to contribute to my income. Yeah, it doesn't really contribute to my income. So it's those four branches that principally make up how I make my living. And I would ask you the same thing, Caryn. Tell us a little bit about what you do.
Oh, I wish I could fit it into 4 branches. I'm afraid it's a tree that at times has been hit by a tornado. But I teach at Goddard College, and that's somewhat of my day job, or mostly my day job. But I only have a 60% position, like 60% of full-time, on purpose because I like to do a lot of other things. And the teaching at Goddard is low residency and long distance, which means I spend 2 weeks in Vermont at the college with students, all MA students doing all kinds of interdisciplinary studies that they design themselves. And I also do some then we go back home and I have my 5 to 8 students I work with very intensively. They send me packets of their work and I write them long letters. And it's very much a coaching, mentoring relationship. But I also do some administrative work. I coordinate the Transformative Language Arts program. And I've been kind of the person shepherding through a PhD program that was just approved in interdisciplinary studies that's going to launch next fall. And I'm very happy to be on that team and not so happy to be writing copy right now to get past the accreditation agency, but that's life. And then I do a lot of freelance work around my community, around Kansas and the Midwest. I principally do writing workshops, particularly for people living with serious illness, and I've been doing that for about 12 years. I give classes to older adults through the University of Kansas, particularly on the Holocaust and lessons from history. And I do book talks through the Humanities Council and readings here, there, and yonder, and little collaborative projects. without going down the rabbit hole too much, like helping catch stories from people of color who are coming together to reinvigorate a falling apart neighborhood in Kansas City, Kansas, or other such things. And I do some performance, not as much as you, Laura. Have stood on a table in a restaurant in central Kansas and made up a poem, but usually it's more collaborative poetry and songs with Kelly Hunt, who I partner with to write songs. And I write a lot. I love writing, and so for me it's not having to force myself, but just creating and holding space to do this, to just turn on the faucet, see what comes out. Writing calms me and brings me home to myself. And even if what I'm writing doesn't go anywhere, it kind of helps me remember that life isn't just happening in my frontal lobe or, in front of my steering wheel as I'm moving ahead.
Yep.
So how do you balance all that you do, and how do you get in enough ways to take good care of yourself? Because nothing personal, we're good friends, but we're not getting any younger.
No, we're not.
Self-care was a part-time job when we were young. It becomes more and more of a full-time job as you get older. So how do you do that in life and in balance with your work?
So I would be lying if I said it wasn't challenging. I think many people who are self-employed find themselves in this interesting position of feeling compelled to work all the time. So part of what I've taken to doing is designating fertile time. What you were just describing about writing is what nurtures you. I specifically set aside time. I try and do it daily. I don't quite manage daily, but I try and do it daily, where I do something that I know will nurture me and will feed me creatively. Sometimes that's taking a walk. Today it was reading a picture book with a new story that I hadn't read before. Some days it's writing, some days it's working on a poem, some days it's cooking a new recipe, but something that allows me to stretch creatively, even if it's a familiar activity, and gives me that white space around me. White space is vitally important. So white space can take all different kinds of forms, and I find that to be very helpful. I also try and make sure that I remain connected. I travel a great deal for work. This year I was away from home probably about 60% of the time, which is challenging. So I've developed some pretty strenuous stuff around taking care of myself on the road in terms of exercise and how I eat, and all that feeds over to when I'm at home as well, and remaining connected. I have a lot of buddy time with people, so just setting up calls and making sure that I remain connected to my creative community. And all of that kind of stuff. And the hardest part of it for me is, as you said, how do I find the time? How do I schedule it? And honestly, the most effective thing I have found is to be a little rigid about it, to put it in my calendar, and that becomes sacred time. That I know if I sacrifice that, I won't be any good to myself or anyone else. So even though it may feel like an indulgence, it is not. It's as vital as breathing. If I want to remain a creative, productive person. And you?
Well, I really related to a lot of what you said, and I love what you share about daily fertilization time. I try to go down to our basement and watch an old movie every so often, even though I'm terrible at not stopping multitasking even at night, and I have to learn to be a lot more. I struggle with that. But I also find that what works really well for me is doing stuff that's physical. I work with a wonderful yoga teacher. Yoga is incredibly hard for me, but I'm just keep falling more and more in love with it. And I struggle quite a bit, even with the most basic things, even though I've gone through teacher training and I've practiced quite a bit. But it's one of the few things that really helps me to get to a quieter place in my mind. I like what you said about buddy time. Just tonight before the call, I was kind of mapping out my next year of how many gigs per month can I do. because I struggle with overcommitting myself and doing everything and then crashing and getting sick and then getting better and then feeling on top of the world and taking on too much again. And so that's kind of one of my lifelong, hopefully not too lifelong, hopefully I have a long life, but I get a handle on that more and more. And I have been over the years. And I was mapping out, okay, if I'm doing a book tour, I have to cut back on this, that, and the other, and I have to say no to these things. And then I got an email offering me a chance to do something I love. But I had looked at the month when it was, and I was already full up. And I called a friend, and I just said, remind me that I have to say no, because I said I wouldn't do more than 5 or 6 gigs in that month. And I'm already there. So just remind me that I'm going to say no and I'm okay with it. And she did, and I hit send on the email, and I fretted a little, but ultimately I know it's the right thing. Yeah. And I think one of the big things that's so difficult is that we have these computers, like we can work all the time. It's so hard to stop working. You can just carry it with you from room to room. And it is, at least for me, it's kind of a little addictive and too enticing at times. And, we have to be rigid and step away. And so I try to incorporate a little ritual in the morning, a little ritual in the evening. It's a constant learning process. How can I come home to who I am? Yes. And do the work I love, because I'm so in love with my work. But I'm also in love with my family and my friends and the dog and cats and the place, and just find a life of greater balance.
Yeah, I think
you just said that there's some noise other than facilitators.
So if everyone can make sure they're muted, that would be very helpful.
Okay. Do we know where that's coming from at all? Does it sound like the clickety-clack of dog fingernails on the floor?
Yeah, it does.
If so, that might be me. I'll try to get him to calm down here.
I love what you were saying about being in love with your work, but being in love with all of these other things as well, and needing to, I appreciate your vulnerability, your honesty around talking about illness and needing to set limits. I struggle with very similar things. For me, as you and I have talked about repeatedly, I struggle with my own chaos, my own tendency to be doing too much at once and to lose track of things and to get overwhelmed. And it's the ways that I found to manage that are all around setting boundaries, setting up systems, reminding myself that I love my work, but I also love my sweetheart, and I love my home, and love being outside, and all of these other things, and that the love is a gift of abundance, so that I need to feel grasping about any of it, as long as I make time for it and plan around it. For me, it's all dependent on planning. Otherwise, I fall to shreds, and I know that. And like you, I hope that someday, this is my life's work. This is one of my life's challenges, but it's one that I like to think I'm learning to cope with better and better each time I have to manage it.
Yes, and I agree with you. So much of it comes to planning. And I was learning this weekend about just researching my own bullet journals. Some of you may know about that, where you kind of keep track of what you're feeling, what you're going through, what's part of long-term goals, what questions and thoughts you have. There's Caleb's. Thanks for sharing that. Well, I realized I do it like in 5 different forms at once. I have some on the computer, I have charts, I have this and that. And that works really, really well for me, but it's basically the equivalent of trying to have a bigger picture. And about 4 or 5 months ago, I started keeping track of my time, like how much time am I putting into certain tasks, which I always thought was a little too OCD-ish, and I don't want to go there. But I'm doing that as a way to learn more about where's my time going, how can I take better care of myself, how can I show up more for the people I love and the work I love. And that really has helped me to start to organize myself a little better. And then it kind of comes down to, what are we alive for beyond what we're staring at on our screens and beyond this passionate work. And for me, my husband and family and community and this beautiful land and sky. I live in Kansas, and the sky is extremely entertaining. They're there, and we won't even go into the state of the world and all that's there too. And probably the most important thing I do to find balance is to step outside.
Yes.
Just step outside and breathe, even if it's very cold, even if it's crazy hot, and just remember I'm part of a busier, larger world. And I know we're coming to the halfway mark here.
I actually think that's a lovely spot to pause and invite questions.
And to open it up to questions and
let me just say, Caryn, I love doing this work with you.
Oh, thank you.
I'm so delighted to be doing this work with you, and that we get to learn together and grow together and share this with others. So I'm
so grateful too. We're definitely sisters from different mothers here.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much for sharing so much of yourselves and your work together. Let me just suggest that if somebody has a comment or a question, can you just unmute yourself if you know how to do that, and just jump right in? Does anyone have a question for Laura or Caryn, or a comment that you'd like to make?
Hi guys, and Caryn and Laura, thank you for doing this. As you both know, I consider you both mentors and teachers, and it's delightful to see the work that you're doing unfolding. So thank you, as someone who is in his 20s and still trying to figure out what a life calling to the arts looks like, and living those struggles of all of that. My question actually for me is very relevant. I had to contact another one of my teachers today and reschedule an appointment because I realized that I was just overdrawing myself today, and that if I had that session with him, that it would not be my best work. And for me, there was definitely feeling that wave of shame and uncertainty of I committed to this and I should have been ready for it. And then life happened, and I felt like I needed to have, my hard stop be at the end of this call. I'm done for the day. I can't do one more thing. So I've been wrestling with feelings of that guilt and shame and uncertainty all day, even though he said there's no issue. And I'm curious. So he's not upset with me and all of that, but I'm curious what your thoughts are on the emotional.
I'd like to just leap in. Our minds are such wild little hamsters, aren't they? I canceled the gig about a week and a half ago because I couldn't seem to get to a place of steady health. I kept pushing really hard and not quite getting over a little virus. And I felt such shame and trepidation and, oh my gosh, how could I have done this? And then I found out last night they found another speaker. It worked out beautifully. It was no problem. The other person was probably thrilled to have the work. So I think, we have a lot of messages that we carry. One thing we're going to be looking at in the Right Livelihood Professional Training, and we also have these like $9.99 90-minute group coaching sessions that you'll hear about. We'll be looking at these types of issues. Like, how do you balance what is right for you with what you've committed to, with what you feel others are expecting of you, with what you expect of yourself? So, Laura, do you want to add to that?
You read my mind. I was going to talk about how that's part of, I think that's one of the running threads through the whole training, which is looking at the expectations we carry and which ones are helpful to us and which ones are less helpful to us. And and also the coaching sessions, I'm sure we'll deal with that directly as well. I also would suggest, I struggle with that kind of thing too. The voices in my head are often far louder and far more acrimonious and crueler than what anyone would say to me. Someone what very wise once suggested to me, what would you say to a friend who just made that decision? And why don't you try saying that to yourself? And it doesn't necessarily quiet the voices, but it at least reminds you that you understand why you did this and there was a good reason, and it gives you a place to start self-soothing and for breaking that cycle of self-doubt. So Caleb, then I would ask you, what would you say to a friend who told you the teacher didn't mind, it was okay, I just needed the break?
Thank you. I'm going to use that. I like that.
Please do. Yeah. I would say good job. Good job setting those boundaries and taking care of yourself.
Yes. Susanna.
Well, go ahead. Was Susanna going to talk?
You have to unmute yourself, Susanna. Let's see.
Yes, it's down in the corner, not up on me. Yes, I understand the work-life balance, but there's more to the work than the work, like the promotion, the writing the proposals to get the grant money and all that sort of thing. And I'm not good at transitioning. And so, I mean, if I realize I have to promote, and then I have to go down a rabbit hole on the internet trying to deal with this, trying to learn Scrivener because I know it will help me, but at the same time, it's sucking up other times. So it seems like you're juggling a whole bunch of balls, and I wonder if you can speak to that.
Caryn, may I jump in on this?
Absolutely.
Boy, that stuff makes me crazy. So let me just first affirm you and tell you that you are not alone with that. It is really challenging stuff. For me, you disappeared. Oh, there you are. For me, I try and remind myself regularly that by doing this is part of the work. It is a frustrating part of the work. It is a challenging part of the work. And I set up fairly strict guidelines for myself about how to do it. For example, I just sent out a postcard campaign, and as a follow-up, I'm making 10 calls a day. I hate making calls. It makes my stomach hurt. I don't like doing it at all, but I also know that I don't get to do the part of it that I really love unless I do the promotion and the marketing. In the Right Livelihood Professional Training, we're going to talk about ways to make these tasks somewhat less onerous and perhaps more a schedule, more a regular part of your life. For the transitions, we are going to talk about, among other things, how you might mark them with ritual, or by looking deep inside of yourself and finding a way to kind of draw a barrier, a boundary around it, how you can demark, how you can indicate this is one kind of time, this is another kind of time, which can make doing the whole task easier. So we'll be delving into all of that as we go through the training. But what I would urge you to remember is that your gifts to the world deserve to be heard, deserve to be read. And unfortunately, in this day and age, they won't be if you aren't willing to do some of the other work as well.
And I just want to jump in, Susanna. What really spoke to me is you said there's more to the work than the work.
Yes.
And part of what you were talking about is kind of learning, like on the internet and this tool or another, how do you use it effectively? What's the best tool? And we will share some tools. But as somebody who was up to midnight cursing at MailChimp last night, had a newsletter ready to go, and then there was a glitch. I know that sometimes that happens, and sometimes we have days, doesn't it feel like days where everything technical in our life messes up? And it's just one glitch after another, and then you get an incredibly annoying email from somebody, and somebody mistook something you said, and so on. And that's part of the work too. And I think one thing we don't talk about enough is how do we work with ourselves and take good care of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
When I woke up this morning, and I begin each morning with drinking hot tea in the bathtub, and I usually wake up kind of slow. I told myself, you had a rough night with MailChimp, so we're going to take it real gentle today and just kind of ease into things and breathe and step outside, pray to the sky, and then come back and maybe take some things off our plate and make today a little lighter. So for me, it's a continual conversation with how to be doing right by myself.
Yeah.
So, and knowing that sometimes things are just going to mess up, and that's how it is.
And sometimes you just need to walk away. You just need to take a break and say, I'm going to start this again tomorrow.
Exactly. Or barter or trade with somebody to do
I was just about to say, or ask for help. Find a way to get some help. And that's another thing we'll be talking about. We'll be talking about what resources are out there that you can use that might be useful.
And there's nothing like having a circle of people together, right? Because other people will give you good resources.
Oh, always.
Hi, this is Diane. I have a question about building community support for yourself if you work at home, as I do, and at times feel isolated. I had a career in newspapers and marketing, and I really thrived in an environment in which I had colleagues. And now I find that that's harder to create. And so I'm just interested in your thoughts about how you build a community of support for yourself and doing your work. Whether
I think Laura and I have a lot to say about this.
Okay.
I'll start by saying I have a very close friend who also works from home, and my 25-year-old daughter taught me the term work wife, so I call her my work wife. You know, we call each other almost every day, check in with different situations we're balancing in work, and we hold that through one another. But I also set up lunches and walks with people, and just ways to reach out and connect through email or a little phone call here and there so that I don't feel so isolated in the work. And sometimes I bring my computer into town and sit at a coffee shop. But it's kind of a continual balance between having that space to do work and not feeling so alone.
Yeah.
Laura, what about you?
Oh, I struggle with it as well, and I do the same kinds of things you do. I have 3 friends with whom I have phone dates every week, and we spend about an hour and a half on Skype with each one. About half an hour is just talking and venting and being coworkers, basically, and having the water cooler conversation. And then we leave Skype while we both go about our work. We say, this is what I want to get done. And so I can look up and see her working, and she can look up and see me working. I find that helps with isolation. I have a number of colleagues who I meet with regularly. Every Wednesday, in fact, I have a group of storytellers with whom I meet, and we get together and we work on material. I go to coffee shops just like you do. I find if I don't work at it, I will sit in my house alone all day, every day, except when I'm sick. And that is damaging. I found, for me, that is damaging. And I'm someone who needs a lot of alone time. I think recognizing that it's a problem is always the first step. And then doing that very difficult thing of getting in touch with people and saying, so I think I'm the only one who ever feels alone. And then they say, oh, thank goodness I do too. And then you can find a way to start maybe not being quite so alone, but it requires a conscious effort.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. I was going to ask, my life really has I guess I would say my life work really revolves around trauma narratives and the way that trauma sort of crashes into all sorts of our lives in times sometimes where, you know, we're sort of like a geological, you know, going on a continuum, and then a big crash happens, and then you're sort of torn asunder, and kind of what the stories are in communities that you hear about all the time. I'm coming out of a time of significant trauma, and finding that, you know, it's very difficult to get into the life's work. But then again, maybe the trauma and coming out of it and the healing, I've just had to realize is that, you know, I have to take time to heal myself, because, you know, I'm just like all of you in terms of I, you know, was always used to being very busy and capable, and, you know, started at a very young age with a business at 25 and worked at Nordstrom and won awards, and I could just go and go, you know, and but what I found lately is it's almost like my body is just speaking up. It's just saying, you need to address this trauma that's there. And so I think what I'm finding frustrating is that, it's sort of a much deeper issue than just, managing your time or, balancing. It's you have triggers that come up that, that's what post-traumatic stress disorder is. And so I'm very frustrated right now because I have, so much I want to do, and I feel like I've lost so much time, because of September 11th and going on into the years following that. There's combinations of feeling very bereft over the loss of things that I wanted to do, and then just how to find the time, to, really slow myself down, because it's really easy to fall into that shame sort of thing. Like I can't function at the level that I was used to functioning. And so it's very difficult sometimes, because I've had to drop out of all of my volunteer work, and fortunately I have a job right now where the people are, I work at a counseling agency with these wonderful counselors who, if it weren't for them, I don't know what kind of work, as far as when, somewhere to go where you could, earn a living, because if you can't show up at 8 o'clock and be there all the way to 5 o'clock, and you don't have an understanding. I was just curious how you guys did that in the Right Livelihood. Because I guess, I'm very interested in taking the course that you guys are, pursuing. It's hard for me to talk about this stuff because it brings up, I just had a counseling session on Monday, so I'm kind of, I don't know if you've ever experienced trauma, but it kind of tends to stay kind of right at the surface for a while.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I have a lot to say.
Go ahead.
I feel like if you're doing the work of your heart, the work of your life, there's something about it that it almost seems to be designed to push you toward greater healing with wherever you have trauma and loss and old wounds. And as somebody who grew up in a very traumatic environment, and I've been in counseling so much in my life, I feel like they should give me an honorary license to do counseling, and I go regularly. I find the deeper I move into the work, sometimes more I need that type of support. And my work on trying to not overcommit, I'm working mostly with my therapist on that. So looking at those roots in your life and getting that support is essential. And also, I think all of us would know so well that we are in constant conversations with our bodies and what our bodies are telling us, and that wisdom there. And I don't want to, I could go on and on, but I'm going to pause and hand it over to Laura.
Well, I was going to use exactly that same word about conversation. Let me start though by just saying, Lita, thank you for speaking. Thank you for being willing to be heard, and for letting us hold some space around you so you could say that and bring it up. It's a really important thing to bring up. I don't know anyone who is pursuing their calling who is not doing some of that work as a way to understand trauma they've experienced and to potentially help themselves heal from it, hopefully heal from it.
Yeah.
I know that my work, for me personally, when I have experienced trauma, it has been one of the ingredients that's kept me going. Sometimes I had to change my understanding of what that work meant.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of what we'll be looking at so I would have loved to have written something that won a Pulitzer Prize. That'd be kind of cool. Doesn't seem like that's the direction my work is going in. So understanding what the calling is and how to dance with the trauma and with the healing and recovery in the context of your calling, I think is really powerful and important.
Right, that makes sense.
I think it's a dance.
I like the word dance.
Yeah.
Yes.
We've had wonderful questions, wonderful presentation. wonderful discussion. Does anyone have a burning, I want to transition us to the open mic, but all your questions are so important that I do want to say, is there a burning desire, somebody who really has something you really want to ask Caryn and Laura before we transition to the open mic?
Could I just add one other thing about thinking about trauma in the context of Right Livelihood?
Very important, yes.
I think part of what helps is having a community around you that can hold the space for you. And I know that Caryn, that's a big part of what Caryn's work is. And quite mindfully, and of mine as well, but I think she's done more of it than I have, quite going into those places and holding that space for people to do the work. I don't think that you could ask for a better guide than Caryn, if this is part of what you need to do with your experience of trauma and how to move back into your calling.
Thank you, Laura.
It's absolutely true.
For me, I'll just add one more. Community and connection to the earth and the power of writing and storytelling is what has brought me the greatest healing.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, having continually to find ways to be in connection with community and eco-community is right at the center of being able to do this work.
Yeah.
So Kelly, transition.
Thank you, Lita, for your questions, and all of you who asked such compelling questions, Diane and everybody. And thank you so much, Laura and Caryn, for guiding everyone through your own experiences of Right Livelihood and doing it so authentically, with so much personal willingness to open up and keep it a very human and real process. Caleb's question also very, very moving and very challenging, this idea of how we shame ourselves for being human, and how much this process of working with Caryn and with Laura, I imagine, can really help. So, okay, so who has something, could I just see a show of hands, more or less? Have you got something that you would like to share in the open mic? Excellent, good. All right, so wonderful. Okay, so what I'm going to suggest is, again, try to keep it to 2-3 minutes. In one or two cases, we may need to go a little bit longer than that. Maybe I think Laura's story might take us a tiny bit longer than that, but we want to hear everything. I'm sorry.
I can skip it if need be. I'm not.
No, we want to hear the story. It's bedtime. We have to have your story. We have to. Not gonna scrimp on that one. Okay, so maybe I could have a volunteer who would like to go first, and then you could just unmute yourself and tell me you're ready to open us up into this open mic.
Okay. Katie.
Mute. Okay, did I unmute?
You did.
Okay.
Thank you, Kate.
Great, I haven't done this before. I have 3 short poems. So one is Dancing with God. Dancing with God bends the rules of gravity and lifts me out of myself into the realm of possibility. Breath breathes me, music moves me, shifting the shape of my heart as spirit envelops me in ecstasy.
Mm.
And on the edge. The edge I walk along is so sharp, I cut my feet, feeling for it in the dark.
Ooh.
And this is the 3rd one. It's called Come Down. Angel, come down off your perch. Come chew dry crumbs from yesterday's bread. Come drink from the tap and squeeze into the skin of a body. Angel, come down from your heights of perfection. Come trip over the obvious. Come swim through the mud and tumble into longing with other fallen angels. Angel, come down from your illusions. Come pick up the mess you left behind. Come tend the children you've risen above, and let yourself feel the immense sorrows around you. Angel, come down from way up there. Come hold the soft center of your heart. Come wash yourself clean with tears and let yourself be.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for going first as well, Katie.
You're welcome.
Who would like to go next?
So I wasn't originally going to share a piece tonight, and then I heard what Lisa was saying about trauma. And then there were Katie's pieces about dancing with God, and I knew, okay, now I have to. This doesn't have a title yet, but anyway. An old Hasidic melody has carried me through tender years, dancing and singing for all to see, while angels catch my falling tears. The master said, "Come dance, my son, and you need not to be afraid. The body and soul, the creation were one, now fragmented in later days." So I danced with my words and my feet, and I felt the inrushing of some holy breath. And I knew in my words there were angels I'd meet, in crescendos of life and caesuras of death. And I let my soul rise from my shadowy chest, till it burned and it burst its corporeal cage. The dance slowed, and I knew that my life would be blessed, and love at long last would cool fires of rage. I turned and saw the master smile, and in delight our gazes met. Your soul will still yearn to be dancing a while, for life will ask more of you yet. A light within my soul has grown to burn and blaze, and purifies this life, a divinely, sublimely my own, where laughter lifts up to the skies.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you, Caleb. Thank you. Okay, who is next?
This weekend, we had a Words Fest in London, Ontario, and I attended. And this was my experience of that weekend. Quick way. This land on which we stand, honored for decades of centuries, historified with just 2 paragraphs in a back wall, hidden, not truly celebrated. I hang my head, apologize to Mother Earth who gives me life. I am going to Wanahawi, in English carries words. Haudenosaunee, you might say Iroquois. Kanyankehaka, you might say Mohawk woman. Just never call me squaw. Onawara, you may say Turtle Clan. Out of Thayendanegea, not the township in eastern Ontario. Though you don't notice me, I am. The M dash, a nod to Emily, but wait, I am. Factory whistles, soft brook of chickens, joyous gospel choirs. I am Hulda's song, rolling waves, cormorant cries, the hint of an Acadian accent. I am lowing of cows coming home each evening, rustle of wildflowers, hum of bees in a September apple orchard. I am heartbeat rhythm of water drums, crackle of real sugar on snow in spring, wagon wheels rolling to a place unknown. I am glacial wind, thundering wave, muted weeping of stunted trees, Gallic hymns. I am a cacophony of mysterious music, love songs in many languages, enveloped in the lullaby of every ancestor, this melody, my DNA. I hear your words, spoken, sung, written down and signed so I can carry them home. And now I am wordified. Automagically, I am refreshed, renewed, rewired, redo, encore.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Wow, this is really special. Hey, Caryn, might you want to go next? I want to save Laura for last. Is that okay, Laura?
Sure.
But I think there's somebody else.
Okay.
Roy and Manoli. Did you have one too? And Roy was going to read something.
Okay, good. I haven't seen all those hands.
And Manoli also wants to read. She's on the bottom. Or she's on the bottom for my chart.
Roy, are you going to go next?
Okie dokie. I can do that.
Great. Thanks, Roy.
You're welcome. So this was, Caryn, this was actually written with you in mind partially.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. And actually, after listening to Lita, it makes a lot more sense. Do I have the courage to bring forth the treasures hidden within me? If my courage dies, creativity dies with it. Fear is that forsaken field of bones where dreams go to wither in the desert. And yet, when I try to kill off my fear, I murder my creativity. So, I will let my fear have a voice, but not a vote. In this way, I can measure my worth by my dedication to my path, not by my successes or failures. I can battle my demons instead of battling my gifts.
Oh.
I can notice that I am neither inspiration's slave or its master, but its partner. And when I hear the dry, bitter, grating voice of the tyrant within saying, who the hell do you think you are? The answer is always, I am a child of God just like you and everyone else. I am an integral part of existence. I am surrounded by spirits who believe in me and who labor alongside me. That I am here at all is evidence that I have the right to be here. I have the right to my own voice and my own vision. I have the right to collaborate with creativity because I myself, just like you, am a product and a consequence of creation. I am on a mission of spiritual liberation, so you will let my spirit go. I am committed to living a creative life because that sometimes brief, but always transformative encounter with inspiration is what I most love. And I know that I am loved in return by my creativity, by that which I work to bring into being. My creative work loves me just as much as I love it. What must I do, even if I know that I might very well fail? This is the courage needed to bring forth those treasures within me. I don't have a title either.
No, it's marvelous. Thank you so much.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Thanks, Roy.
Yeah, sure.
Just what we needed to hear. Who is next?
I think Manoli was down here.
Manoli, you with us? Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
You can.
Oh, lovely. Manoli, I have to confess, Manoli is actually my eldest son's name. I'm using his computer and never got around to changing.
Where are you calling us from?
I'm calling from Brisbane, Australia.
Oh my
gosh.
Just a wee bit away.
What's your name?
My name's Nikki, and my pseudonym is Veronica. So either is fine. Nikki is fine.
Oh my goodness. Welcome.
Thank you. And I'm sorry I was a little bit late. I got back a bit late from running a few errands, so I'm glad I got the last bit. It's lovely to meet you all. I'm very new on this journey of discovering poetry therapy, and it's changing my life, and it's because of the poetry that I'm actually where I am today. So I understand the meaning of trauma, and I'm listening to everyone and agreeing and thinking, yeah, this is a journey and it continues and it's wonderful and you just don't know where it will take you. And for me, the main thing is you never give up. Mm-hmm. So I'd like to share with you, I just had my third chapbook published last week, so I'll share with you a couple of poems from that one, if I may.
Wonderful.
Okay, so the first one is called Sunset Chorus. Do you hear the sunset chorus, camouflaged by dusk's light sheen, foraging for food and friendship inside canopies of green? Can you hear the deafening ruckus? Thousands upon thousands here, each one acting out of instinct, each one satisfaction here. Might you hear their hope-filled voices, this their home that's still intact? Right on cue they come for feeding, this their species' secret pact. Can you hear your own voice echoed in the chant they offer all? Is it not a chant of glory, simple beauty, complex call? Each day with anticipation, this free chorus I await, each day never disappointed by the meal on this here plate. Okay, this one's called There Comes a Time. There comes a time when silence reigns, no voice, the heart it bleeds. The words explode through trembling hands, onto the page it feeds. They scramble quickly lest they're lost and never see the light. Letter by letter, word by word, each phrase a healing sight. The more they say, the more they're heard, the more room in the soul to take a breath, to step right back, to heal and to be whole. Never lose hope, nor say, no point, done deal, it's over now. While there's a heart that beats with love, you'll always find a how.
So much. Delightful.
And just one last one, if there's time.
Yes.
This one's called, it's called Weighty Concerns. Have you ever wondered about the relative weight of peace, sadness, anger, frustration, joy, confusion, grief, contentment? Imagine reaching down into your heart and picking out each one gently and holding it between thumb and forefinger, observing it intently before placing it ever so gently on the scales. I'd imagine the odd one might need to be grasped more firmly, difficult to weigh because of its uncomfortable squirming, while others would barely need to be clasped, their feather-light feel demanding a certain mindfulness and sensitivity so that they would not be unwittingly damaged. It would be good to know how much they weigh, but even better to know the weight capacity of each one's heart. I have a hunch that's where we get it terribly wrong. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We're so glad you joined us from so far away. We feel so
Thank you. It's so much cheaper than getting on a plane.
Let's see. Who would like to share whom we haven't heard from? Are we to you now, Caryn?
Okay. Well, I'm going to read this book based on this poem, not the whole book, based on what others have read. It's called Healing. I'm a newborn giraffe, my slick leg shaking to standing for the first time. I'm a raw green snake that lost its skin. I'm not a happy camper. I'm a kitten skidding across the floor to the rushing wall. I'm fog that can't seem to let itself burn into iridescence. Do you see me in the storefront reflection? Do you think of me when you could get up but won't? Do you wonder what could even is and how it can be so new and broken while the world cries in each crevice to fix it instead? Listen to the exhausted angel straining to reach you, her hand on your shoulder asking the question. Hear the answering kestrel riding the jet stream. No effort, all effort, to surrender to the sun, then the moon, each lifting up their reflected and reflecting faces, then bowing toward the dirt where everything begins.
Beautiful. Thank you. I'm going to read one also that I picked out because of what we're talking about, and then I'm going to...
Just letting the dog out. I'll be right back.
And then I'm going to have Laura go. This is All These Cures. One day you imagine the grandmother you need and find her living in a Swedish bakery, serving tea to customers in wooden booths on wooden floors in her sweet and steamy shop where she feeds your hunger for cinnamon and vanilla, your dream of comfort from butter and baking, the yeasty promise of pastry, curling, and browning. You ring the bell and a door swings open on a ritual you make so she can greet you. If she speaks Swedish, you will never know. Her intuition is precise and proofed in silence. The blend of tea she serves you cannot tell. Her cures are brewed in brightly painted pots, steeped in mystery, poured into china cups on saucers she sets steaming under your nose. Her intention is to love you no matter what, and you learn to let that be a nice surprise. You learn to trust she means what she makes you feel, warmed and wanted, sweetened and safely seated, belonging. Every time you ring the bell, a door swings open and she is there to greet you until the day she doesn't, because she is dead. You thought she lived where she would live forever, but your imagination means more than that. What she leaves you is the shop, your place in it, and the mystery of who you must serve in her absence.
Very lovely.
That was beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, let's see. Laura.
Okay.
Take us out on a bedtime story or whatever kind of story it is.
I think this is a good bedtime story. This is a very short version of a Chilean folktale. There was once a woman, Mariana. She lived by the sea in a small hut, and though she loved the sea, all the ways of the sea fulfilled her, her heart was full of loneliness. She yearned for nothing more than to have a child in her life, but at her age, she knew that children were not to come, and although she tried to befriend the village children, they ran from her, pointing and cackling, saying that with her long gray hair, she must be a witch. So it was that one day Mariana was walking along the seashore, collecting the gifts of the sea, the seaweed and the snails and the shrimp and the crabs, and she found a great crab shell wrapped around with seaweed, and inside she found a child of the sea, a girl with long hair the color of kelp, with a tail that contained all of the colors of the ocean. And she picked up the child and held her to her and thought, I could love you as if you were my own, and yet you are not mine. You are a child of the sea, the spirit of the sea. So she held the child out to the ocean and called forth, saying that she would return the child to the sea if only her mother would come. And then 7 waves came crashing and curling in, and on the 7th was the spirit of the sea. She looked at her child and she held her close, and then she handed her to Mariana, saying, you shall care for my child until she is big enough to be safe on her own in the ocean. I will come every day and I will teach her to swim and to fish and all the things that she must do to live, but you shall love her. And so it was. Mariana loved the child of the sea. She learned how to comb her long seaweed hair, and she learned how to help her into the ocean, and she cooked such delicious things for the child that the village children came creeping by to smell the aroma. And then one by one, they crept into Mariana's house, and they too were fed with the love of her heart. And the child grew. And every day the spirit of the sea came riding in on her 7 waves, and she taught the sea child to swim and to fish and to sing the voice that sounded like distant waves. Until the day came that the child was old enough to swim out on her own. Mariana embraced her and tasted the sea salt tears on her own cheek and let the child go, thinking she would never see her again. The children in her home consoled her and comforted her, and she loved them well, though the child of the sea was her first love. And yet, every year, 7 waves would come crashing in with the spirit of the sea and the child herself, and they would bring Mariana gifts of shells and sparkling stones and seaweed and shrimp and starfish. And they told her that they would always remember her for her gift of love. And so it is to this day, that if you find yourself in a particular village in Chile, you will hear the story of Mariana and the child, because they are not forgotten. And as long as we are remembered, as long as there is the ocean, we will be loved. So, good night to all. Sweet dreams. Kelly, I turn it to you.
Thank you.
Or good morning to some of you.
Yeah, that's true.
Thank you. Laura, Caryn, everybody here who's joined us tonight. It's been a remarkable evening, and I think there's a lot of nourishment and a lot of wisdom that's been shared tonight from one, and a lot of beauty, a lot of really lovely, beautiful words, and certainly a lot of creativity for us to take into our dreaming tonight. So again, thank you, Caryn. Thank you, Laura. What is the best way for anyone to follow up with you, particularly to find out more about Right Livelihood?
Go to tlanetwork.org. You can also sign up. You should see a pop-up, and you can sign up for our 10 for 10 list that you get for free, which is just 10 ways to do various things. It's more considerations than orders. And you can click on the trainings and go to the Right Livelihood training. And you can also sign up for some of the group coaching sessions coming up if you're interested. Oh. Thank you so much, Kelly, for organizing this and holding us all together.
Yeah.
And everybody for being here.
Yes, thank you everybody for being here. You know, Sparks, it's a really special time together every 2 months, and your presence on the call, your presence in this room really matters. We're all taking care of and being there for each other, and I'm just honored that we could be together tonight. This is going to be a video recording that will be made available to you. Terry will be emailing you and letting you know when it's posted on our YouTube channel. We'll probably post it on Facebook as well. So if you have an interest in reading, in looking at it, you'll be able to do that and sharing it with anyone. We'll share it with everyone who wasn't on the call. Thanks again. Stay tuned for the next one. It's coming soon in December.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Blessings. Good night.